we are presenting the Coding for a Cause, a design thinking curriculum with Scratch. So just a quick icebreaker, if you're here for this session, we're curious, what is one of the most memorable Scratch projects you've either created yourself or you've witnessed a student create? Feel free to come off mute. You can drop it in the chat.
Hey there, this is Jen Wallace.
Jen.
I'll talk. So this is a Scratch Junior example just because it's what I've recently done with students and it's the one that comes to my mind, but it could be done in Scratch as well. So I had a student just create a rocket taking off and then landing and exploding, and the coding they did with the fire was so cool. Just, you know, the movement and the sizing to make it really come to life. I was really impressed with the students and what they did. So there you go. There's my example.
I love that. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, the animations in Scratch are so cool, and like the artistic side of things are super special. Any other examples? And again, for folks trying to figure out Zoom passcodes, feel free to work with Liz in the chat here. Lori says creating games for sure. I feel like there's always some incredible games. Ooh, a snowfall, Andy. Super cool. I love it. Well, we are in a racing game from Christy, but we are here to talk all about Scratch today. We see a lot of familiar faces, but we'll just do a quick intro. Liz, who you've heard a lot from this morning, is the manager of curriculum and instruction at Code Savvy, and I work a similar role but part-time. And we have been working on this new curriculum that is going to launch here this summer. So a little bit here in terms of our session agenda, we're going to kick it off with a little intro to design thinking. Then we're going to do something called the 10-block challenge, which is a fantastic way to introduce students to Scratch that is part of our curriculum here that we'll share. We'll preview the curriculum that is going to launch here in the summer. We'll talk about bringing it to your students, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So, lots to cover. But by the end of the session, you should be able to define design thinking. That is kind of the crux of our curriculum. You're going to explore a bilingual Scratch design challenge curriculum, and you'll get to brainstorm ways to incorporate this curriculum into your setting. So to get started, and we have some cohort members here who have done a similar activity, so we'll definitely lean on you to support us through this start. But we wanted to kind of start here with this activity called Design a Hat. And your goal in this short activity is we're going to introduce design thinking through an activity that you could bring to students. So we're going to ask that you grab yourself a piece of paper and a pencil if you don't already have one. Post-it note works fine, scratch paper, whatever you need. But that's where we're going to start today. And we have 3 users here on the screen that we are going to be designing for. With the time that we have, you likely probably will only design for one of them. But if you want to try and go ahead and design for a couple or all 3, you're certainly welcome to. But what we're going to ask you to do, we're not going to give a ton of direction here. It's pretty wide open, is we would love for you to design a hat for one of these users on your paper. So thinking about what are some of the wants this user might have, what are some of their needs, as you think about them wanting to wear a hat here. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll take about maybe about 2-3 minutes to draw. No shame in how your picture turns out. You'll be welcomed to share it, but you definitely don't have to with the whole group. So I'll go ahead and start my timer. Go ahead and start drawing, and we'll check back in a couple minutes.
Hey everybody, I don't have the password to get into the Zooms. Does anybody have a password?
Which passcode are you trying to get into?
The Minnesota State Standards.
Yes, give me a moment. here's that Zoom link, and here is the passcode.
Okay.
If that doesn't work, I'm waiting to hear more, but there's not much else I can help with at the moment. But
Okay.
once I figure something out, I'll let you know. Same with
Okay.
Carol.
That code should work. Let me try it. Thank
Perfect.
you. Bye-bye.
We have about a minute left. No pressure. All right, and I'm gonna catch that timer before it dings because I'm sure it will wake us all up here as we hear it. It's very loud. Fantastic. I hope you had some time to design for at least one of our users. Maybe you got a chance to design for a couple. But would love to open it up to a little bit of reflection here as we think about what we just did. So would love for anybody to drop in the chat or come off of mute. Curious to hear a little bit about the hat you designed, why you chose some of the features that you did, which user you chose, and why you made some of those design choices. And after we see a couple, we'll open up the second question here. So curious if we have any brave volunteers. Paul, I see you coming off mute.
Yeah, here, I'll try and unblur my screen so you can all see.
Awesome,
Okay.
thanks for volunteering.
Yeah. All right. So I chose user 2 because I thought it sounded like a fun design challenge, which was the narwhal. And so I decided that somehow I needed the hat to accommodate the whatever the narwhal's things are called. And also provide a little shade. So I decided to just add in some extra like spikes to kind of match the style of the existing prong, and then have kind of a brim that goes around the outside to provide some shade. So yeah, accommodating the existing thing and enhancing it with some additional spikes, and
I
then
love it.
some shade.
Yeah, I love the additional spikes or horns or, whoever has the narwhal knowledge here can maybe tell us what that's called. I'm not sure either. Thanks, Paul, so much for sharing. Any other takers that want to share the hat that they designed, whether you use user 2 or somebody else here on the screen?
I could share quick.
Andy, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. I made mine on a sticky note. I can try and unblur as well. But I went with a narwhal with a backwards hat. My son has been very into wearing his hat backwards lately, and I call it sport mode. So our narwhal is entering sport mode.
I love that personal connection so much. So cute. Amazing to see how different those two designs were too for the same user here. Love it. User 2 was a popular user. Our second question here that we're going to continue to move on just for sake of time, but that you might ask students as you have them either share together kind of with a partner or with a small group, would just be asking them after they've seen other hats, were there any design features that they feel like they would want to adapt into their design? Both Andy and Paul gave such fantastic reasons for the design choices that they made. And it's meant to kind of spark ideas among others. So appreciate that. I'm going to pass it over to Liz here to actually formally define this design thinking term for us.
Hi everyone. So what that activity was designed to do was to get us thinking about human-centered design or design thinking. Design thinking is a common practice or problem-solving approach used in a variety of spaces to design and create solutions to problems that are all centered around who you're designing for. Oftentimes, when we're problem solving or designing for someone else, we lead with our assumptions of what they might want or need, rather than really focusing on communicating with our users through feedback what they actually want. So I'm curious if we were to do that activity again, where we're designing a hat for our user, how we would want to spend time and ask questions to our user to really get a clear idea of what they want or need when it comes to a new hat. The design thinking process is not linear or cyclical, but really relies heavily on gathering feedback throughout every step of the process. Define is where we determine what we're going to focus on, which for here was designing a hat. Empathize would be where we communicate and really connect with our users and learn what they want or need. Ideate is where we would begin brainstorming and prototyping based on what we learned from our users. And prototyping is where we would start bringing that to a physical form and taking our designs to life. And finally, we would be sharing our designs with a larger audience and what we learned. Capturing the design thinking process in an image is really difficult because it doesn't always follow the same path from project to project or design to design. For example, if we were truly creating a hat for a book or a narwhal, we might work through that ideation and prototyping phase several times before we even get to sharing it. So it really just focuses on what are we creating and how are we ensuring that what we create really meets the needs of those learners. So with that, we're working on finishing up our Coding for a Cause curriculum. This is a design thinking curriculum in Scratch that supports educators and students in designing and creating for technology for good. It's designed for elementary learners, and the complete resource is bilingual, where all of the student-facing resources are both in English and Spanish. You'll also find later on in the session that we really prioritize this resource to be educator focused to ensure that no matter your background in computer science, you have the resources and knowledge to teach these computer science concepts confidently. So to get us started, before we dive into that curriculum, we want to take a moment to have you work through one of the first programming challenges that students will work through in this curriculum, which is the 10-block challenge. Your goal with the 10-block challenge is what can you create with 10 blocks? You can use each block once, twice, or more, but your finished program or project must have each block used at least once. That's all I've got. So what I'll do is I'll share a link to Scratch right now, but you're going to have a couple of minutes to create a project in Scratch with these 10 blocks. Feel free to reference back and forth to this slide. And if you have any questions, feel free to unmute or drop those in the chat. So here is the link to Scratch.
if you're new to Scratch as well, as you hop in here, you need to create an account if you want to save your project, but for the sake of this activity today, if you want to just jump in, you'll just hit create. And this is where you can drag and drop these blocks and connect them kind of here in the middle. And to see them in action, you'll go ahead and hit the green flag, and your cat will perform what you're connecting here in the middle. So just a quick kind of demo here for folks that are maybe new to Scratch.
And sorry, with the rules, are we supposed to definitely use all 10 of these? Can we use additional blocks or just these 10?
You have to use just these 10, no more.
All right, thanks.
Good question.
No pressure. We got about 3 more minutes here on our timer. I'm actually going to shorten it to 2 to put us under a little bit of pressure here, so we have time to share out. So about 2 minutes. No worries if you don't finish, but again, the goal is to use all of these blocks at least one time. All right, wrapping up in about 5 seconds.
All right, actually, I have to go to the next screen. So we want to see your 10 block challenge. So click on the share button at the top menu of your screen and click on that copy link button and drop that link in the chat. Knowing that you might not have been able to finish your program, but that's okay. And then thinking about the 3 questions we have posed on the slide. What was something difficult about only using 10 blocks? Which block did you end up using the most in your program? How does that block work? And then what are you hoping to try out next time? Give a moment for those links to be dropped in the chat. Thank you, Paul and Lori.
I'm gonna go ahead and open, and we'll start with Lori's here. Lori's like,
Like,
no,
oh
don't do it. Lori, you know that we're gonna make you be our guinea pig. That's what you get. I'm thinking we might need to add a show block at the start. Let's see if that works. But then I think this is gonna work. Lori goes, oh, I'm loving it. Okay, let's try this. Oh, when the sprite is clicked, though. We'll show our sprite down here so we can find it. Oh my gosh, I love it. So it looks like it'll repeat 10 times. And then Scratchy Cat will say, I'm hungry at the end. I love it.
Thank you, Lori. We have Christy and Paul. Do we want to do one more before we move on?
Christy, I'm gonna make you be the other brave one. I know you say that very unfinished, and that's okay. We want to celebrate unfinished work as well. Look at the title.
Oh my
Unfinished.
gosh, Christy.
Oh, but look, you've definitely got to start here. So click the sprite. Glides. For 10 seconds. We got a slow cat mover.
Me before my coffee.
Right. Oh, and then the meow, and then goes back to the start. Love it.
Awesome. So we wanted you to try out the 10 block challenge. Obviously, if you were teaching this with students, you'd give them more time than we gave you. But we really enjoy the 10 block challenge because you're able to give students a restraint as well as a smaller amount of blocks to work in within the Scratch platform. And they are able to create pretty unique projects. One thing that you might do if you were teaching this with students would be encourage them to change the sprite, add a backdrop, and personalize it more in that way. But we wanted to give you a chance to dive into Scratch before we dove into the logistics of the curriculum.
Great.
You got it?
Yeah, sure, I can
Perfect.
So a little bit here about our curriculum. A couple of the activities we started with, you'll find directly in there, which is kind of fun. We wanted to sneak preview some parts. But this curriculum is meant to just kind of be a 1-week activity for students. It could be modified, of course, to a little bit longer if you'd like, shorter if your students are flying through. but it includes 5 student-facing slide decks with very detailed educator lesson plans, including speaker notes if you're either delivering this yourself and not super confident with Scratch, or you're sharing this with another teacher that maybe is new to Scratch. Anybody can jump in here. We really aim to provide students with in-depth introduction to both design thinking and also programming with Scratch. So twofold there. And as you saw in some of our images, this curriculum is completely bilingual. So it includes both Spanish and English in each of the resources that you'll see. A little bit of a recap of what students will learn in these 5 lessons. The first one we call Find Your Focus. And this one really similar to the activity we just did. You'll find the 10-block challenge. Students are getting familiar with Scratch for the first time for many of them. And for some of them, maybe there's maybe they have a little bit of experience. There's some extension pieces as well. But then they're going to be introduced to design thinking, and they'll have a chance to brainstorm a possible project idea that they'll be building out throughout the week. So the ideas here for our projects are that they're going to raise awareness about a school or community issue that they are passionate about. That's really kind of the heart of the design process here. Second lesson, setting the stage. Students are going to be introduced to a couple of blocks here, some of the ones you just saw in your challenge, the sound, looks, and motion blocks. And they're going to start actually building the project that they brainstormed in the first lesson. Lesson 3 is all about sending messages. If you're familiar with Scratch and you've done broadcasting before, this is a really popular way to get different sprites to have conversations with each other. So lesson 3 really focuses on that piece and how to facilitate conversation among different sprites. Lesson 4, they're going to start thinking about how they can ask a question. So that moves into another new block where they can actually get input from people that are using their program. You'll also see in this, along with those Scratch programming concepts, as well as design thinking, we're also really intentional in this curriculum to bring a lot of very, very important computer science programming concepts. So for example, lesson 4 focuses very deeply on variables, which is a super popular concept among many different programming languages. And finally, lesson 5, they're going to make their program a little bit more interactive. So now rather than just asking the user a question, based on what the user types in, their program will do something. So this is another programming concept called conditionals that students will be introduced to as they think about how their programs can make decisions. You'll also see throughout these lessons some soft skills that we'll introduce students to that we feel really strongly here at Code Savvy, that students get some of these pieces like debugging, persevering through a challenge, getting feedback. A lot of those skills are really woven through as well. So we've got 5 lessons here. And then we also have an additional 6th deck, if you want it, which we just call the project showcase. And in this final kind of lesson, if you will, there's a lot of flexibility to how your students might actually present these final projects that they've created with either just their peers. We know some teachers in the past have liked to bring in families to see some of these presentations. So a lot of flexibility here with how students can kind of share out these projects that they'll likely be very proud of after the week. So a lot going on in this 1 week, but a lot of really, really important skills here. We do kind of want to highlight here the lesson layout. So you'll see on the very first, we'll get a chance to look at one of these lessons here in a second, but on slide 1, we have our kind of lesson plan, if you will. So this just gives you a brief lesson description of what students are going to be doing, gives a few prep materials, gives you links that students will need to access, and we just ask that you review this prior to teaching the lesson. So it's 1 slide, it's pretty quick. We also include some supporting resources if you need a little bit more support with some of the concepts for the day. You'll also see, as we noted, this would be an example of the student-facing slide on the top, but the speaker notes on the bottom go into great detail, truly like word for word if you wanted to explain some of these concepts to students. So again, you can take this curriculum and share it with any teacher who's brand new to the space, and they should find success very quickly with bringing this to students. So you can lean on those speaker notes if it's helpful. You can run it the way you want to if you prefer. So what we're going to do here is we are going to actually share with you one of our completed lessons, lesson number 1. Liz has dropped it in the chat. And we would love for you to take a few minutes to explore the lesson here. You can look at it top to bottom. You can take a look at the facilitator notes, whatever you feel like would be most helpful for you to kind of get a feel of what this curriculum looks like. This again is just the first lesson in the unit of 5. But we're going to take about, I think we'll take about 5 minutes to look through the first lesson here. So I'll go ahead and mute myself. I'll start the timer. Let us know what you need in the chat. We have about 2 minutes left to preview. Again, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat as you're exploring.
I'm not sure.
We'll come back together in about 10 seconds here.
All right, I see Ashley stopped the timer so we wouldn't have the jump scare of it going off. But I'm gonna have us jump to the next slide. Initially, we were going to have us go into breakout rooms, but just because we're such a small group, we're just gonna open it up to the whole Zoom meeting. So we'd like to hear what you thought and what your thoughts are moving forward. So feel free, if you haven't already, to introduce yourself, what age of students you work with, and then share initial ideas you have for incorporating this curriculum into your setting.
I can go first.
Yay.
I don't do Scratch just because I teach K1, but my name is Christy. We're introducing or starting computer science in my district, and so I only really have a 25-minute lesson with my kids, so we're figuring it out this year. Next year, I'm hoping to do Scratch Junior. But I do like the 10-block challenge. I don't know about K, but maybe with first grade, I could do that after they have some idea of what like coding is when it comes to Scratch Junior. But I really like how there was, I don't even know, towards the end, you had like examples of how, like, of some of the students that have done it in the past, maybe that it was incredible. I don't even know how to do that in Scratch, but like the Save the Planet one, I love that idea so that kids can be like, oh, I want that, so that they have like a vision of where they can get to after learning. So that was kind of cool to see. But I do have a question for you guys. Since we're starting this at our district, have you guys ever seen, you can get them on Amazon, the Scratch and Scratch Junior coding cards? Do you know anything? People have used them and they work I mean, I know they're nothing like this would be where I would start, but then once they have a better understanding of it in maybe small groups or something, any feedback on that would be nice too.
Jen, do you want to share? You gave a thumbs up about your experience with it.
Well, yes, I've used both. I have not purchased the Scratch Junior cards, but I've printed my own, and I printed copies of, there's like 7 or 8 challenges that students can work through, and it helps them get familiar with the blocks and Scratch Junior. And very similar, the cards for Scratch I have used. We've done a partnership with the Science Museum, and so my teachers have gotten cards, and they're many activities as well, and they're a great chance for students to learn again the code. And like kids, my elementary students, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, want to make games, but you know, there's so much that you can do. Scratch is so robust. So like, I like the 10-block challenge with beginners too, because it really focuses them and on a certain number of codes, and then they can actually see what they can do. And then I like the Scratch tutorials in this similar way, because they have to follow the code kind of exactly. They can be creative with the sprites they pick, but they get to learn the code. So like, I'm just starting to do those tutorial Scratch cards with my 3rd and 4th grade students right now, after they've had a session with with our Science Museum connections. And I've kind of set it up as like, they've had a chance to tinker and explore, but like when we do those cards, it's really a chance for them to like learn the code. And like, that's our focus, is learning more of like the codes and the blocks and how they work. And then so we can move on to then maybe more creative approaches. So that's kind of how I've used them. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jen. That was really helpful. I saw, Andy, your suggestion as well with the voice recordings with the QR codes. That's a fantastic idea. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. Does anyone else want to share out to the whole group before we continue on?
was just going to say that one thing that was helpful in that slide deck was the starter code for the 10 block challenge. Just eliminating that one step of having to go find all the blocks. It was nice to be able to click a link and then rearrange the blocks.
Yes, glad you noticed that. We didn't give you that scaffold, but that is something you can do with students to support. So they're spending less time finding them and they just get to build. Awesome. Well, I'm going to continue on as we have about 5 minutes left before this breakout session ends. Getting access to the curriculum. So this full curriculum will officially launch this summer. It is a free curriculum that everyone and anyone will have access to. It was created in partnership with the Scratch Foundation. So it'll be free and launched this summer, and we're really excited about it. In a moment, I'll drop the interest form. If you fill this out, you'll be the first to know when it's launched, and you'll get access to it right away. And then ideally, you'll get to bring the Coding for a Class curriculum to your classroom this fall. So that's how you'll get access. I'll drop that right now to the interest form.
I'll just plug here too, as Liz is dropping that. We'll also share this curriculum on our website as soon as it's final. So if you're wanting to share it with other teachers, they can find it there. But yeah, this interest form will get it in your hands probably the fastest.
Thanks for that plug, Ashley. And then the last thing, one thing that we're offering this summer is a Scratch Educator camp. In past years, what we've done is we've split it up into like a beginner Scratch camp and an intermediate Scratch camp. Our goal this year is to just make it one course where you're developing and learning a lot of skills in Scratch, as well as instructional strategies and pedagogy for introducing Scratch and integrating computer science into your classroom. We don't have the date set for that yet, but I do know it'll be an in-person professional development that will go over a couple of days. I also want to plug our Code Savvy Educator cohort. We work through instructional strategies like the 10 block challenge, semantic waves throughout different sessions, and it's a really great opportunity to build up your resources as well as knowledge around teaching computer science. So with that, I'm going to drop 2 links. If you're interested in learning more about the cohort, we will be doing a session on that later today, and 2 individuals that are in this meeting will be talking about their experiences. So we're really excited about that. And finally, we might end a couple minutes early, which is all right. Ashley and I just want to say a big thank you to coming to this session and to expanding CS opportunities in your spaces. And we're always looking for different ways to connect and work with educators and other organizations around expanding computer science in Minnesota. The best way to connect with us directly is most likely email. So we included our email here. You'll also have access to this complete slide deck after the summit. So if there are links you missed or things you want to reference later, know that you'll have access to this in your drive forever.